we probably spent nearly 30 million euros in like 6 months.
Wow, it's 30 million euros in 6 months.
Not very scalable, no business model behind it. We'd lose money on every order, of course. But it was quite viral because people suddenly had the whole city in their hand, right?
This is Sacha Michaud, co-founder of Glovo, a company that scaled across dozens of markets, raised hundreds of millions, and helped define on-demand delivery in Europe and beyond.
Can you take us back to the first meeting with Oscar?
I was going to compete. I said, I don't want to compete against this guy.
How were you convinced that, look, we're going to win in multiple categories from the beginning?
Our first version of the app was a text button, but to grow organically shows you're onto something.
25 plus countries, $2.3 billion acquisition.
And we didn't have any marketing money the first year.
What was the first point that you realized that this is going to be a big business?
In my opinion, passion and culture, skills can be learned. Literally within 6 months, we said, this is going to kill us if we continue fighting in Brazil. I think the toughest thing for Glovo has always been fundraising. Has always been convincing investors that we could compete against much larger funded companies. Top talent doesn't want to work with assholes.
Sacha, we are in Barcelona, 10 to 11 years after you started Glovo. It's now 25 plus countries, I believe. $2.3 billion acquisition a few years back. Can you take us back to the first meeting with Oscar and like, how did everything start for Glovo?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the invitation. So we're celebrating our 10th year. It's going to be 11 in January or 11 in March next year when we took our first order here in Barcelona. In my case, I was in a different industry. I was in the gaming industry. I was with a huge UK company who's now huge. It's called Flutter Entertainment. It's the largest gaming gambling company in the world. And I saw, really felt that what was happening with apps and what Uber were doing with ride hailing in the US specifically just then. And they were just revolutionizing a very traditional industry, which is ride hailing taxis through tech. I thought, this on-demand thing is going to be huge for consumers. And, I thought, hey, wouldn't it be great to do an Uber, but instead of moving people around a city, moving things was a little bit. And I was thinking about that with a couple of investors and just sort of getting started. I was a couple of months into ideation and, saw a great company in the US called Postmates, which was a very good reference. I thought, wow, they were onto something. And Oscar was studying in the US in Georgia Tech. He's from Barcelona. And he came back and some friends said, this, a young kid, because he was 22, has come back from the US and he has a similar idea to you and you meet him. And he was fundraising already and he was actually going very, very quickly. And I said, Oscar, I really liked him. Super smart. Had a lot of drive, very listener and had a lot of qualities that I liked immediately. And I asked him, hey, I think you're doing something similar. I'll invest in this round as well. How much are you raising? And, I'll cover the rest or whatever it is. But let's do it together. And in the end, he checked me out a little bit. He didn't know anything about me. So somebody said, oh, he's okay.
But how comes it you did that actually? Because given that you did other businesses in the past as well, right? So it's like, Oscar at the time was very young. How comes and you actually make this decision?
Yeah.
And by the way, it sounded a bit competitive at the beginning. So how comes and you didn't start your own and you joined and you did it?
I met him and I thought, I'll be perfectly honest. I mean, if I was going to compete, I said, I don't want to compete against this guy.
Yes.
Actually, I went back and said to one guy who was the original idea, actually was talking and was a big investor. I said, I met this guy's just come back from there. I explained. He said, well, why are we doing it with him? Why don't we just raise money and kill him? And I said, no, he's very smart. It was a good decision. And we pretty much, I think January 2015, we closed a pre-seed round, 140K, imagine.
From Barcelona?
Yeah, generally Barcelona Business Angels. I put in some myself. And we launched in March 2015, the first order. So we went very quickly. And I think Oscar in the US as well was seeing, Uber and he was seeing what was going on in the US market, which was a good couple of years ahead of Europe as usual. And I think he saw that tendency and he came back and he said, look, why don't we do something like that? And then, as you get into the space, you realize there's other companies doing similar stuff in Europe, and then realize Deliveroo were really growing in the UK.
So Deliveroo was live at the time.
Yeah, but for me, they were an initial reference because remember, I wasn't thinking so much about restaurant food. We weren't. We were thinking about a lot of other things. And in fact, our first version of the app was a text button. Well, there's two text buttons. It's go and get something for me. So go and buy it for me.
Interesting.
Or go and deliver something or pick up something. So no. So basically a courier service. So keys, imagine, I've left my keys in the office. Go and pick them up and bring them here. Or go to a restaurant, go to McDonald's and pick me up 2 Big Macs. So we had 2 text buttons. Not very scalable. No business model behind it. We'd lose money on every order, of course. But it was quite viral because people suddenly had the whole city in their hand, right? It had no limitation. So it was and people began talking about it a lot. There's this app and it actually works.
What are the first orders that are placed, given that you can order anything?
We had a lot of restaurant food, actually. That's what really...
So was it evident that because of the frequency of food, it's a very important...
I mean, it's something that we assumed there would be a lot of restaurant food. But what was happening, they were from top-end restaurants. So basically, restaurants who are not in the delivery space, not really interested, a deluxe hamburger place or a really top-end sushi places, consumers would order from there. The courier would go there, pay with a debit card, wait, not very scalable at all. They'd prepare it and he'd pick it up as if he was a normal customer doing a takeaway. And then we started so of course, consumers in Barcelona, then Madrid, and we launched it then in Valencia, and then we jumped to Italy. Suddenly they had the best restaurants in the city available without a menu, without anything. Operations weren't great. Obviously, there's a lot of missing products. I wanted this. The courier would call the customer. Sorry, they don't have it. But it got us started, and it was like an MVP. We didn't think it was an MVP, really. We thought it was like the first version. But actually, we used that model for nearly 18 months. And it was growing, but we're growing super quickly, obviously, because it's not a lot of pain points. The product's not there or they're missing something.
From the driver side, how did you convince the Glovers to actually do this task? Because it's a 3-part.
Well, the couriers were paid per order, and they were paid quite well per order.
I see. So was it an easy part to actually get them?
Yeah. It was easy because it was a flexible model then as well. So many couriers weren't full time; they'd be doing other things. They'd be combining with going to the university. So there's a lot of combinations, and generally, and obviously in the beginning of launching a city, which is one of the tricks we had, we often wouldn't have enough orders to give them enough income, right? Which is one of the big chicken and egg things that our industry has. So in the beginning, you'd pay them fixed fees, and so guarantee them a certain amount of income per hour, even if they didn't have orders.
I see.
And then that would give them, a decent income per hour, which is interesting for them. And then we'd work around that. And then going back to your question at the beginning, the first orders they were everything. People would go to, pharmacies, tobacco. We don't do tobacco in Spain anymore for regulatory reasons. But in the beginning, people would order, a pack of Marlboro Lights, which would cost €5 and pay $6 to get them delivered. And electronics, chargers, groceries, of course, last minute groceries. And then obviously the category that really took off was restaurant foods, and specifically in restaurants that were either had a very good brand. So the top, McDonald's, the top brands like that, but also high quality restaurants that normally would be dine in and maybe have a takeaway service, but really high level.
At what point do the restaurants get pissed off that this is happening?
In the beginning, they don't, because it's incremental revenue, and there was in the beginning of Glovo, there was no commission. We didn't have an agreement with the restaurant, so there's no contract. But I remember our first really top brand was a very top end sushi restaurant at the high end of Barcelona, and it became very popular. And in the end, they got so annoyed because it wasn't just one courier there. They'd have 10 couriers outside every night. And so they called us and they said, what's going on here? And I said, no. Luckily, the head maître of the restaurant who was running the restaurant said, no, I'm actually a user of Glovo. I use it for McDonald's. And he said, look, I said, why don't we put some tech in? Why don't we put in an app so you can prepare the order? Couriers are waiting less time outside. He said, yeah, but I'm not going to pay your commission. I said, no need for commission right now. And the great thing about that is we signed with zero commission. The sales team the next years were really annoyed with me because they had to try and get commission off these guys, and they're used to paying zero. But it was great to have their brand in the app, because what happened with that is all the other restaurants in Barcelona said, these guys are there in Glovo. It's not so bad. I want to be there. This is a top sushi brand. Maybe I'm missing out on something. So it serves as an attraction to the brands that were sort of against delivery in those days to join us. So it was a great move to get their brand in there.
So it's like, is the key from the restaurant side the actual brand of like having like 3 big brands, and basically then it brings all the other restaurants? That's how it works?
I think it depends on the city. We're in a totally different place today than we were 10 years ago, and an evolution of the market. So today, delivery and digital, and by the way, digital now is not just delivery. It can be pickup. It can be a lot of things. It's key to every single, pretty much every single restaurant. In those days, it wasn't, of course. And it was perceived as slightly negative. I remember went to see one restaurant to try and get him in the app, and he said, no, I don't see my brand next to a bunch of kebabs. Nothing with kebabs. But his perception of being that, I said, no, this is a new type of delivery. This isn't, because the old companies like, Just Eat, which is Gen 1, we call them, would have that type of interface where they would just have a marketplace, send the order to the restaurant would do the delivery. Sometimes with a courier, but sometimes with a waiter would actually get on a motorbike and deliver it. So that concept scared a lot of people who really focus on high quality brand, high quality food. And we were trying to change that. That actually, it works, amazing UX for users, are cool, and users love us. They're talking about us. You have complete visibility of the order from the moment you order to when it's delivered. You can see the courier going through the city. So there was a bit of a first year of really convincing brands. Then things started to get traction. Then started becomes normalized. And
was the first, was at that point that you realized that this is going to be a big business, then roughly at the year mark, or was it earlier?
I felt super early. I mean, I'd built companies before.
Yeah.
And with got to millions of users. I'd never received so many congratulations from my friends.
Interesting.
In the first few months of Glovo, saying, hey, what a great idea. And you know what? It works. And I said, yeah, of course it works. But there was a lack of belief when you talk about the service that I said, this is quite cool. When you have organic growth, and we didn't have any marketing money the first year, pretty much a year and a half, until we built the marketplace, which is what is the base of Glovo today, which is what everyone sees with the brands, with the categories, and with the menus and the prices. We didn't really do any marketing. We did a few. But to grow organically shows you're onto something. I think that's a great sign of a business.
So just people telling each other.
People telling each other. We did quite a lot of press. The press loved us in the beginning. They thought, what a great idea.
Press? What kind of press?
Just anything. Anyone who wrote about tech, anything who wrote about product, anything who wrote about retail. At the end of the day, it was, part of the streets. But tier one media and newspapers and things would get an article in there, talk to them about the business. Journalists would love it because it's useful for them. It's something that it was a storytelling. So we used a bit of press that worked quite well. But I had a sense that the organicness of the growth, the virality, even though it was small numbers in those days, was like, we're onto something here.
So it's basically the rate of growth and the organic rate of growth. Okay, very interesting. And then from what's the point that it changes from text and then you start adding categories in the app?
Yeah, so pretty much a year and a half into the business, maybe a little bit less. We built Glovo 2.0, we called it, which was actually what is the marketplace today, which you have visibility of the categories. And that was the moment when you really start fixing a lot of the pain points in the operation. You start now getting commissions off our partners. So for every sale, we work hand in hand to win together.
But on that, how do you convince someone that doesn't pay you to come and pay you?
Well, we're giving them incremental revenue. They're starting to get big. You're either in there, you're either with us, or your competitor's going to be with us. So you can have this in those days 5% incremental orders, or our consumers are going to use one of your competitors. And restaurant food has generally has quite a high margin, so they could factor in the commission. They didn't have to have a new restaurant to work with us. They'd use the standard restaurant, the same staff. So I think it was just a way, and it's a small percentage of the business at the beginning. Obviously, we were growing, Today, it's obviously the digital side of most restaurants' business is a significant part of their business. But in those days, it was a question of you're there or one of your competitors is going to be there was probably the main thing. I think those that were reticent about joining us.
It's very interesting. So the app changes in that format, and then what changes from the operation side? Like, how do you get more Glovers to be doing these tasks? And are we speaking now that you are still in Spain, or did you expand?
Then we were in Spain and Italy.
Spain and Italy, okay.
Yeah.
Why Italy?
Italy, we had an opportunity. It was opportunistic. It was there was a local company similar to Glovo, a great GM, Deliveroo, and I believe Uber Eats had just moved into the market. We're going to invest heavily, and they were having trouble fundraising. The investors thought they're not going to be able to compete with these giants, and there was an opportunity to acquire that business. It was very small, but it was more the talent. It was more the GM, and we could suddenly launch Italy with a good team. And it was, it was a great decision. Matteo did a great job the first few years of really building us really into competitive player. With the story of Glovo has always been David and Goliath. We've always been the smaller player versus hugely well-funded companies competing against us with a lot more money. So we had to be a lot more agile and have better teams and local execution. But we had an opportunity. Got trust that this company was having trouble fundraising and might be willing to do an exit. We flew over and did a deal very quickly.
Yeah, but like, isn't this like, didn't you have exactly the same questions from investors? Is it like Uber is coming here and so on? Like, how were you convinced about it?
That was the toughest. We had many tough things, obviously, but I think the toughest thing for Glovo has always been fundraising. Has always been convincing investors that we could compete against much larger funded companies with a lot of capital. We pretty much had to find a lead investor every single round because all our lead investors were not that deep pocketed. Whereas you had our competitor in Latam, Rappi. We did a huge round for us was then, and then we read the next day that Rappi's done triple investment by SoftBank. SoftBank had unlimited funds. SoftBank, you just know if they execute right, they're just going to have unlimited amount of capital. So fundraising was super, super tough, convincing investors that we could actually compete.
Seeing it from the other lens, given that you make investments these days, like, do you think that they were right, or what would the investors were missing?
No, I think, I don't know if they were right or wrong. At the end, we were a bit of a success story, but I think there was three things happening. Certainly the later stages, which is when you really need big funds, because we're closing, 100 million plus rounds. I think there's three factors. The funds that were really interested in our space, on demand, the really important ones had probably already invested in one of our partners, one of our competitors, sorry.
See?
So then there were many funds who weren't interested in our sector. Either they got, burnt by some other on-demand category, like ride-hailing as well. Many of the ride-hailing apps failed. So I think that, or really, and then there was the third segment, which was, they thought a small Spanish company, couldn't compete with these huge, and in those days there was Deliveroo in the UK, killing it. Uber Eats doing world domination across into Europe. Delivery Hero was one of the leading European, Berlin, now we're part of the family. And of course you had Just Eat, which although it's an incumbent and has a different model per se, they just send the order to the restaurant and the restaurant goes and deliver, which hence gave us the opportunity to go in because generally the UX was terrible. 20% of orders would be lost. And
was this the case?
Yeah, so we call it Gen 1 in our business. So Gen 1 was you'd order either through a web or an app. The order would go to the restaurant, but the app or the website would forget about it. No visibility to the courier. The restaurant would then be in charge of getting that food to the customer. So of course, many restaurants didn't have couriers available or didn't have, waiters available and they would just not do the order. So terrible UX. So, 20% or 25% of the time, you're calling the restaurant, where's my order? So that allowed Gen 2, which is companies like ourselves, to control the whole flow. So an order would come in through my app, from a consumer. We'd let the restaurant know. Meanwhile, we'd let a courier know. The restaurant would begin preparing the food, and then the courier would pick it up and then deliver it, and always giving visibility 100% of the time to the user, right? And if there was an issue with prep or the restaurant couldn't do it, then we'd let the customer know. So you'd have a less bad experience, and instead of waiting for an hour and then calling the restaurant. So that allowed us to do that. So I think there's a little bit of that was it. And then there's the fourth group, which were the crazy ones who actually trusted us and led our rounds. And then we had a lot of investors as well that weren't leading, but were continue to invest that backed them up. So our current investors would often continue investing. And also we're very lucky, to be honest, that fairly early on, Delivery Hero, which was a sort of competitor because they had different brands in different parts of the world, invested in us and allowed us to work independently, and they always continued investing in every round. So they would back up the lead investor, which was fundamental. That support we got.
That's something I want to ask you in a bit. The one thing I wanted to bring up is that you have all of these. You have always the idea from Peter Thiel about get one market, monopolize one market before you go to the next one. In your case, it seems that you did a number of things at the beginning. You allowed a lot of people to be ordering many different things. Did you know about this idea, or was this a wrong idea? Or how were you convinced that, look, we're going to win in multiple categories from the beginning?
It's a tough one, really. And I don't know what was we did our decision. Looking back, if we only focused and doubled down on restaurant food, would we have done it better? I don't know. One thing Oscar certainly had was our vision of everything and anything. That's how we built Glovo from day one. And we definitely wanted, we call it multi-category. So we wanted to give our consumers that they could pretty much get anything from their city. And obviously restaurant food's the main category by far. Groceries was the second, and et cetera, et cetera. And I think it came down to, although the percentage of orders of everything that wasn't restaurant food was very, very small in the beginning, actually. It's growing faster now than the restaurant. But it was a wow moment, right? So let's say, I'd order 4 times a month on Glovo, and 3 times was restaurant or 4 times was restaurant. But every now and then I'd order, nappies, because I've ran out of nappies for my baby at 11 o'clock at night. That's a wow moment. And it really tightens us with the consumer. Or last minute I'm cooking and I can't leave the house, and I'm missing some ingredients, and I'll go and pick it up. Or my charger, or left my keys. Or my kids have come home from school and they don't have any keys and I'm in the office. Those type of wow moments were quite important, I think, for people to talk about us. Because getting a hot pizza, even in 2017, is not cool. I mean, it's not something it's not something you're going to go and talk the next day about. But saving somebody's moment there is a moment that they'll go and talk about it. And I think it helped consolidate us in anything brand, which was super cool. And I think we were perceived as much cooler with consumers than the pure restaurant players, who were just all about restaurant food and just delivering hot food. I think it was an important part of and then what happened, and it was still a very small part of our business, but we maintained, and many of our investors, of course, suggested to us, no, why don't you drop all that? It's insignificant, and double down on restaurant food. And we kept firm. I think we made the right decision. And then COVID came along and changed the game for everyone, right? That's when when all the supermarkets you couldn't go. Suddenly supermarkets were on the apps. Then you had Uber Eats, Deliveroo scraping to get groceries in. They had no experience with groceries in those days. They had that pain curve that we'd been doing for a number of years. So suddenly it spring rocketed all the other stuff we were doing, right? And educated the market to a certain extent. And all those consumers who've ordered groceries on demand, like immediate grocery deliveries in COVID, are still ordering today.
On that, what's the secret that they didn't know and you knew about the groceries?
Well, groceries is a different business, right? I mean, one thing about restaurants is they have a very small menu, very controlled menu. They normally have 100% of the dishes available. Very rarely they run out of dishes. Groceries, there's no visibility of stock. So this management of, if you order 3 bottles of water and some coffee and this brand, maybe the grocer doesn't have your coffee brand. A lot of that. So that's the pain point that you need to address with restaurants. Size of project. I mean, you order 6 bottles of 1.5 liter water is heavy. You can't just fill. So there's, that's not going to happen probably with a restaurant delivery. So there's operational things that we'd already, encountered difficulties and learned from it and built. So we were in a better position for multi-category than anyone. And we were the only company in Europe, by the way, doing multi-category. In other parts of the world, they were doing Asia, was, for example, the companies in China and Southeast Asia and a region where, they're like Glovo on steroids, I would always say. They just did everything. Incredible companies. Companies like Gojek, Grab. So yeah, that really, and then the COVID moment sort of really said, wow, actually we were right, really confiding in our vision. But yeah.
And at what point does the McDonald's deal come in? Like, I heard the story about McDonald's many times, that it was a very important moment for the company. Can we speak a bit about it? But then also, like, as we discussed before, like when you allow deliveries for this type of big companies, probably they're not going to like it. They're going to come after you for it. So what's the storyline there?
In the beginning of Glovo, of course, we didn't have any commercial agreements with some of the top brands, but our customers were ordering them. So we decided, we'll put them in the app, we'll put the menu in, we'll let customers orders, we'll charge a higher delivery fee, obviously, to cover the cost because we don't have a commercial relationship with that restaurant. And McDonald's was, of course, one of those.
So people were paying more to order McDonald's.
Exactly, they'd pay more in our app to order McDonald's, but they'd still order, and it was our number one order at the time. And I'd be calling McDonald's regularly, saying, "We're getting a lot of orders. Let's sit down and talk, and let's make the operations." And they were just ignoring my call, never answered me back. They weren't interested in delivery anywhere in the world at that point. They thought delivery.
The reason was what?
I think at that time, being associated with delivery was being associated with lower quality brands. There's a perception that the people. It was the small corner, kebab place, Chinese restaurant, pizza, nothing wrong with any of those. But there was a perception that it was just a very, non-attractive to be, lower quality, right? So, and as things were growing, and we were getting a lot of McDonald's orders, but we didn't have an agreement with them. So the courier would go there, order the McDonald's, pay with a debit card, a pre-debit card that we give them, and then deliver, and then we just charge a higher delivery fee to try and, not...
Wait. So that's a debit card that you gave to the...
Yeah.
Oh, how do you know that they don't go and charge for something else?
Well, I mean, there's an onboarding process and things. I mean, generally, 99% of people are good. So, we had a few issues of them using the debit card, things like that. But that's part of the operational thing. That's the same with consumer fraud, that happens everywhere. But generally worked quite well. A lot of, being on top of the business, being on top of the details. Operations has always been the key element of our business, from the beginning, just being on top of everything. And then McDonald's changed CEO worldwide. If I remember rightly, a British guy, actually, in the US. And he said, no, delivery is going to be part of our strategy moving forward. So he told the business, and they created McDelivery. They signed a global worldwide agreement with Uber Eats. Uber Eats were then expanding quite heavily outside of the US and everywhere.
How did this deal happen with Uber Eats? Like, did they invite everyone in a
No, it was in the US. I mean, we weren't in the US, so I don't really know. We woke up one morning with McDonald's signed a global agreement with Uber Eats. And then they were pitching in Barcelona. Actually Madrid. They were pitching in Spain for who would they be their delivery partner, because Uber Eats were not very big here. We're tiny.
How do you hear about this, by the way?
We were calling them, of course, all the time. Now they got into delivery, so we were on top of it. We got to meet them, and there was the pitch. I think there was Deliveroo, Just Eat, ourselves, and the team.
What's the competition there? Is this on price? Is this on availability of drivers? What were
So we were competing head to head. I think for market leadership in the market with Deliveroo. Then they'd invested a lot of money in Spain and advertising and billboards everywhere. So we were probably, the best two companies positioned wise from market share, but we were still. But we convinced them just by saying that we'll do anything you need. We'll do something ad hoc for you. When you're not just going to be another restaurant brand for us. You're going to be the restaurant brand. And the team did an amazing job of convincing them. It was a high-risk decision by McDonald's. They had to play for a little small Spanish startup but luckily, they chose us.
Was Deliveroo inflexible, would you say, at the time?
No, I think they were less hungry. Just less hungry. We were super hungry. We still are. But we just put all our effort into that. We sent our chief of product there to show them the product, how it would look in our app. We built them a custom version. And they said, let's have a bet on these guys. They're so passionate and so hungry. Game changer, of course. It was in those days, McDonald's were doing exclusivities. Now they work with all the platforms. But in those days, they wanted to just work with one in every country. And
what does game changer mean, by the way, at the time? Like, how do you see it translating?
Well, just skyrocket orders. At the moment, McDonald's announced publicly, although we're getting a few orders with them, like the moment McDonald's announced their delivery and the operations obviously were integrated. So basically they have our tech in their restaurants, so therefore they can prepare the order. So the time lowers everything. And we also work with them on excellent operations to make sure it's streamlined, to make sure that their hamburgers and their Big Macs get well to the customer. They're very important. They're very focused on quality, on repetitive quality. So we work with them to give an excellent service. And that went well for both. They were super happy with the agreement. And the Italian managing director of McDonald's in Italy saw what was going on in Spain and actually said, well, no, that's going really well in Spain with Glovo. I want Glovo as well. We were already in the Italian market and they chose us there as well. So but I mean, maybe if we didn't, sign that deal, then we may not be here. We wouldn't be here today. So it's one of those things that you look back on and it's a great story and great job by the team, by the way.
Mm-hmm. So you have this deal, and then first of all, how do you actually negotiate with the McDonald's on getting something from it? Like, so you don't sell for free, for example, and so on, because they know that they are the brand and they're paying you so much. So it's like, how do you actually negotiate with them? And then also the second thing is like, when this happens, how many other restaurants come knocking at the door?
Well, I mean, negotiate the best you can. Small company, we knew we needed them for survival, and we couldn't lose this account. So we were much more flexible than probably our competitors on negotiation. But in the end, it was a fair deal. They were fair in the negotiations, and it was a win-win for sure. And then obviously other restaurants see that, but I think what's equally important is the fact that, of course, this positions us very quickly as market leader. And what restaurants really want are two things, right? That we give a great service, and secondly, that we bring incremental volume. So if I can bring them 10 orders instead of 5, or I can bring them 100 orders instead of 50, I'm their top choice, as long as I can maintain a very good service. So I think part of that allowed us to position us to quickly, start being market leader, and being able to offer a better service, better quality, more orders, of course. So,
at the time, how many people are you at the company, excluding the Glovers, the riders?
So if I remember right, around McDonald's, we're probably around 80 people.
Wow,
80 or something. We had a small office that was originally planned for 50 people, and we ended up being like 120, and then there was people going outside in the street to do calls because we had nowhere. It was pretty crazy because we need to get a new office soon, and it takes a while to find a big office, and you're growing so quickly. But those fun times.
Was there any similar moment with any of the supermarkets, for example?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about supermarkets was fairly interesting because we were the only one. Remember, we were the only multi-category player in Europe.
Yeah.
So doing on demand for supermarket was very rare. And also supermarkets had their own e-commerce platforms by then. So they were selling online through their own websites, never same day. In those days, it was always the next day, and windows still exist today, by the way. Many supermarkets still operate in that way that, I'll deliver you tomorrow between, 10 and 12 or 12 and 2. So the on-demand side of things was new for them. And that was tough convincing a lot of supermarkets as well. I remember I had a lot of visits to, the top brands saying, look, we're not competitive. No one's ordering 2 or 3 things from your supermarket. Your order's big baskets, planned purchase. Go in there and I'll order all the stuff and you'll deliver it tomorrow. And normally it's like, we're small baskets, very convenience, last minute. You're not in that space. You're not going to be in that space, by the way. It doesn't make any sense economics, and my economics work. So why don't you join? And slowly we convinced 1, then 2. Generally it was always no, then no again. And I think, our head of quick commerce, we call everything outside of restaurant business, we call quick commerce, which includes groceries, pharmacy, electronics, flowers, toys, pets. Pets is an interesting one that's growing. So yeah, we get a lot of no's. And our head of, quick commerce always say, every deal you need at least 10 no's. So every time we got a no, it's a positive sign because it's one less till the yes.
Super. Is there some sort of third category you would say it's in a similar kind of importance in terms of the revenue sides that they bring and the repetition of the customers they bring? If it's the first one is food, the second one is groceries.
Yeah, it depends on we're in 22 countries and very different places. No, so we're in Southern Europe, Central Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and Africa. And so there's different contexts in different places. I'd say the most advanced by far, and it goes a little bit with the market's educated people know they can order groceries online, right? Big brands are doing that. There's been some vertical operators as well that do groceries, and of course there's Glovo, so that's definitely the number 2 category in the fastest growing area of the business, right? And I think, I think quick commerce, and we call it quick commerce, is gonna be super exciting in the next 5-10 years. It's like it'll be the fastest growing area of e-commerce. And the rationale is simple. Pretty much in most big cities today, anything you buy online, which today is mostly through e-commerce, of course, those products, 80% of the time are actually in your city. Yet you are ordering them through, an e-commerce giant or a website that the product is thousands of kilometers away. And obviously it's impossible to deliver that in 30 minutes. It's often impossible to deliver in 24 hours or 48 hours. So you get it. And there's a whole logistics nightmare that, if I can get that same product, my trainers or my shirt or whatever I'm buying, and it's available in my city, I can just have it in 30 minutes at the same price. It is the same price. Then a large percentage of that I'm going to do it. And then you have another factor. There's no returns, right? One of the big things about e-commerce is I don't know if you buy online, but I do, and I'm never at home. You got the company saying, "I'm here." No, I'm not there. Can you come tomorrow morning at this time? No, I can go. We only do day deliveries. So it's a nightmare, right? So a whole lot of frictions there. The great thing about ordering on demand is you're there. So you know where you're going to be the next 30 minutes, the next 40 minutes. So basically delivers and you get it. And I think that's going to be tremendous. And I think the large e-commerce companies, and we know their names, and it's not accidental, but they're moving closer and closer to the consumer. Companies like Amazon used to have their warehouses thousands of kilometers away. Now they're building them in the outskirts of large cities. They're buying retailers.
Didn't they buy Deliveroo? Do I remember well?
No, they invest in Deliveroo. DoorDash acquired Deliveroo recently. Recently.
Interesting. Okay, I see. Back to the story.
But they do have Amazon now in the US.
Yeah. If we go back to the story, you have the McDonald's deal, and then at what point do you guys start expanding to different countries? And then how does this work really? Like, can you put me in the ground? Like, who do you send first? How does this expand? How does this work?
Yeah, so we started in Southern Europe. So this was Spain, Italy, Portugal, and we set up operations in Paris. We operated there for a number of years. We never expanded out of Paris. Paris was super competitive. We didn't have the capital to really double down on France, huge market. So we focused on Southern Europe initially. And once we started getting operations and learning what worked and what didn't, we launched in Latin America.
What countries in Latin America?
Pretty much a lot, like Brazil all the way to Central America.
So you decide one day, look, I'm going to go 10 countries.
Capital, and we convinced our investors that Latin America's, and we really built launching teams. So
what's a launching team? What consists?
It's probably a handful of super smart young people who have no problem just getting their bag, traveling across the other side of the world, setting up the operations. So that's basically setting up the commercial team to try and get the partners. So the restaurants, stores, commerce, the local commerce, getting courier operations, getting together so we have enough couriers, looking for a GM, preparing where, maybe the launch, the marketing plan. So start building this so the day one when we actually open the app, that everything's going to work. So that's an launching team. And then what they would do is they would go to one country for 3 months, put out all the framework, and the whole team would then move to the next country.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are we speaking about 5 people, 10 people, 50 people?
It's around 3 or 4, generally.
3 or 4 people. So 3 people go, they start. What's the sequence of things? Is this the marketing approach? Is this the office?
It's everything. We set up the legal entity because we operate, we set up a legal entity in every country we operate. So they set up the company. They start looking at one person's, more the operational side of things. So starts getting the advertising for getting couriers. We're launching this business in a month or so. The partners, we start reaching out to the restaurants and the stores saying, hey, we're launching. Do you want to be? These are the conditions. So you start basically guerrilla street work, get into a co-working. Sometimes, start looking for a definite office, basically trying to do all the bureaucracy of launching. And then we call them launching teams. And these, to be honest, the launching teams have become some of the best senior directors that we've had in the company because they've really felt the pain. They understand how the business works underneath. Amazing.
They did all the small things.
Yeah, we've got, some have been GMs. They've run countries themselves. So after launching, they decided, actually, no, I'm going to become a managing director of that country. Regional directors. They've been, running, 10, 12 countries today.
And you mentioned GM, by the way. Like, what makes a good GM for each of these locations?
A good GM is very 360. Good reference for the team. A good manager, but also a respected manager. But also, willing to pull up his sleeves, her sleeves. That they can, get down to the ground, willing to talk to partners, willing to be on top of the operation. So very hands-on, I would say. But at the same time, very reference and transmits, our image, our culture to all the, people they're talking to, which are often, our partners, which are restaurants and stores, big, large chains, that make them feel that they want to work with somebody like Glovo. So it's a mixture. It's a big 360. We value a lot culture. Our values and culture has been very important from day one. We've worked on them very. We don't renounce to them in the sense that it's our culture. They're our values, but at the end of the day, it's more important than that, in fact, than skills, in my opinion. It's passion and culture. Skills can be learned.
Yeah, and then you launch in all these countries. What happens? And how do you actually know like what works, what doesn't work?
So we had mixed experiences. Most of it positive in Latin America. So we launched, I think 10 countries, and generally business was going well in many countries. Argentina, Peru, we're market leader, or very close to market leadership in pretty much most of the countries. Brazil, which to me is almost a different continent as well. It's a huge country. We struggled a lot, and I think Brazil was a very good example of fail fast. So we launched in Brazil. A great local operator, still is today, called iFood. They had 95% market share. Great operator, had all the great brands. They were working really well across the whole country. We came in, coincided that Rappi, which was our main competitor in Latin America, SoftBank behind them, Uber Eats as well, were launched Brazil similar time to us. So all of a sudden you had 4 players one operating amazingly well with huge market share, the other two with super deep pockets to just throw money at the market and Glovo. Literally within 6 months, we said, this is going to kill us if we continue fighting in Brazil. So we closed down the business there, lost a lot of money very quickly. But
what's the spend like when you are losing a kind of market like this?
I don't remember the figure, but we probably spent nearly 30 million euros in like 6 months, and we decided, look.
Wow, 30 million euros in 6 months.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it was a great decision. It was and then you realize, that's not how we want to enter the market. We also launched too many cities. In our standard playbook is you launch the largest city in a country, and you get that right. And you start getting the operations right, and you get the differentialities between the different countries can sometimes be very significant. So you get that right, and then you expand into secondary cities. That's our standard playbook, and we would do that everywhere. Brazil, for some reason, don't ask me why, we went to 12 cities all at once.
Interesting.
And we didn't get it right, and we weren't. And
none of the cities, by the way?
It was very competitive. I mean, again, iFood was there. They're doing an amazing job. Why would anyone want to swap to Glovo? Just because I'm spending advertising? And then I had my competitors, the new competitors coming and spending advertising. In the end, it was a great decision. And in the end, LATAM, we had an opportunity to exit. Pedidos Ya, which was one of our competitors in the market, which was owned by Delivery Hero. They made an offer to acquire our business. And we thought, you know what, this is so competitive, Latin America, with what I said earlier in Brazil, with Pedidos Ya, Uber Eats and Deliveroo. And we were doing okay, and we had a great offer and a good return on investment because we invested in the market X amount, and we got 3 or 4 times back. And we got that capital invested in Eastern Europe because we were going really well there, which suddenly started picking up, and much less competitive operations were really working. And I think it was a great decision. And we're pretty much market leader in Central Eastern Europe today. And I don't think we would have survived in Latin America because just for the capital. Operationally wise, we were very competitive. We always had very good operations at Glovo. I'd say superior to our competitors. But sometimes if you haven't got the capital to do that, and then it's difficult.
Understood. And then what about the US? Did you guys ever launch in the US? Why not? I know DoorDash is blowing up there. I'm using them often in San Francisco, but I don't remember having other alternatives, right?
It's very competitive. It's a huge market, huge players. At the time, you had DoorDash, you had Uber Eats, obviously in their home market. On the West Coast, you had Postmates, who did a great job. You had Grubhub then, which was the income. They were the Gen 1 player. Remember the one that an order would come through, but they generally pass it on to the restaurant. The restaurant would do the logistics. So you had some big players with. So we avoided super competitive markets. Certainly, UK was also very competitive. In the end, we ended up leaving France. We only launched Paris. We had, very small team. We ended up getting about 10% market share in Paris at one point, 12%. But in the end, it was a market that's very competitive. So we end up focusing on markets where we could either be leader or co-leader. I think there's a lot of advantage of being market leader or very close to market leader in the country where we operate. And we focused that as part of our playbook. Is there an opportunity here? How good are the local operators? What's the competition like? And things like that. And we started really focusing on that. So we avoided all these huge competitive markets. And the typical ones in Europe then were Germany, France, the UK, obviously the US we didn't even look at.
You mentioned Delivery Hero before. How do you let a competitor invest in the company at the first investment you guys received? Was there some sort of conversation internally? Should we take money from them or not? Can you put
of course. There's the board and current investors were very, thought, whoa, you're letting a potential competitor in. At the end of the day, I think it comes down to two things. There was some trust there.
Why is that?
I don't know. Nicholas is an entrepreneur. To have an entrepreneur investing with that mindset, he He was very clear that he wanted us to stay independent, that we were doing a great job. And there's a bit of trust there. And secondly, to be perfectly honest, I mean, I mentioned this earlier, we it was tough for us fundraising. Anyone who would write a check in those days, we'd take it. So it wasn't a question of, I'm often asked, by entrepreneurs, how do you choose your fund to invest in?
If you have options.
If you have options, yeah, we didn't. We'd take anything. And that's the truth. I mean, it was the biggest struggle we had every single round. And also, in those days, everything was so competitive that we were cash constrained, literally, that we'd close a round and literally we'd have to begin fundraising again. And we'd be doing another round in 9 months. So
wow.
It's consistent, because just to be able to compete. And remember, we're businesses that generally in the first few years, you're not profitable. So, it's not a business that the unit economics work day one. Like maybe ride hailing would be a good example. Ride hailings, the unit economics are fantastic. No, they just charge a commission to the driver, but ours, we actually have to factor in the cost of delivery that we end up paying. And in the beginning, it's not profitable. So it's a cash burn business at the beginning.
I see. And then at what point do you start thinking about an acquisition? Was this close to the exit, or was this much earlier? And what was the rationale behind it?
I think we got to the point where, Delivery Hero was a significant shareholder of the company, because they'd invested every round continuously.
Oh, in every round. So
well,
at that point, what percentage did they have?
They were getting close to 30%.
Oh,
so
wow.
they were our main investor at that point. And I think, we sat down and with Oscar, and we said, I think the reality is it probably makes a lot more sense that we joined Delivery Hero and we become part of their portfolio companies. Then we weren't competing in any countries with any of their other brands. So that's a very important point. We were in Southern Europe, Central Eastern Europe, Africa, and Central Asia, which is our areas where we operated in. And their other brands were in other parts of the world, right? The Nordics, Korea, Latin America. Pedidos Ya acquired our business, Asia, and Middle East as well. They're market leaders in the Middle East as well. So there was a lot of synergies there. And then the second thing is, Delivery Hero is a holding group of different brands, right? Delivery Hero, there's not a Delivery Hero app. So they manage a number of leading brands. Pretty much most of them are leading brands, so market leaders in the regions. We knew that we'd have the autonomy to still run Glovo and still be global and not feel part of a huge multinational. With one thing that would have, maybe if Uber Eats would have killed the Glovo brand, obviously, if they'd acquired us. Uber Eats, if they acquired us, they would kill the Glovo brand, and we'd be Uber Eats today, and we probably wouldn't be here. They wouldn't need us. They wouldn't need our tech team. They wouldn't need our 800 engineers that we have in Barcelona. They wouldn't need our, because they'd integrate that, which is fine. But so I think there's just all roads seem to make sense there, and very happy we did that. A great relationship with them. So yeah.
What changes after the acquisition? Is there any significant change? What's the first year looking after?
First thing, poor Oscar doesn't have to fundraise anymore.
Okay.
So that's the biggest thing, which takes a lot of focus off. The CEO, 60% of his time, 70% of his time fundraising. So that's the first thing.
On that point, not needing to fundraising anymore, does this mean that basically if you wanted to expand to a new market, or if you wanted to expand the business in some way, is Delivery Hero investing that amount of money so you don't need to do it? Is this how it works?
No, it generally works. You plan your budget, right? And you say what you want to do this year. We've just gone through the process for 2026, and you'll align what makes sense and what doesn't, and you'll have those discussions. The same way if you're doing the budget internally, we have the same discussions between the C-level team, and you decide on a budget, and Glovo today isn't profitable. We were hoping this would be our first profitable year, but we've had to invest a lot in the Spanish market. And then what's the objective? And today the case of Glovo is, let's move to profitability. Most of the Delivery Hero brands are profitable. They're possible, and we're one of the last ones. So that's the focus of the business, and we're all aligned on that. So does that mean? Of course, we'd love to launch other countries But that mean that we're more focused on profitability instead of launching other countries? Absolutely. So we'll decide that. But that's just standard business. I don't think that hasn't changed because of Deliver Hero. We'd probably be doing the same decisions if it was Glovo. How much capital can we have? How much are we willing to invest? Can I convince my investors, or can I convince my board that we should be doing this?
There's a couple of other questions I wanted to ask about this. Is you get some sort of crisis from Spain and about the Glovers and all of that. And I want to understand from you, when you have some sort of crisis that basically there is no obvious answer and no obvious way of dealing with that problem, how do you solve it?
In what sense? Sorry.
You have this type of problems that you don't have the immediate answer. That is, you have to go and do this specific type of solution to this problem. Many times you have a big crisis that basically there is no obvious answer. There is no way of dealing with it. Like, when this happens to you, or how would you advise someone to be dealing with this type of problems?
Just get on with it. I mean, there's no problem unsolvable, right? It's how you solve it. You can solve it partially. You can do it. I mean, you just get down and just get on with it. No, roll your sleeves up. Obviously, building a company that touches so many pain points and so disruptive, and we're a company that not only touches the future of work regulation, but it also touches local commerce regulation, mobility, data protection. We're touching so many areas that it's a very complex business. So obviously we're going to encounter issues, different crises in different regions. Morocco today, which is a very important market for us, are not really thinking about freelance versus labor contracts. They're more worried about rider safety, couriers, how they're on the roads, things like that. Which in Spain it's not an issue because generally there's road traffic and road safety and road compliance is generally accepted and most people do it.
Yeah.
So there's things that are very different. And I think the best way is doubling down, ownership of the problems. Make them yours to fix. Make sure you get the right team. Listening to smarter people in the room, and then you double down on it and just fix it.
In the team culture, how do you grow the teams? I spoke with multiple teams in the past that they have super small teams that make decisions. There are others that most of the decisions come down. How is Glovo set up internally in that sense? And then the second one is, I saw Oscar mentioning about the becoming more political over time and communicating in a more political sense, that it was a big mistake that he have done. And he changed saying things as they are afterwards again. How did you deal with that? Like, did you have something similar? Do you have advice for entrepreneurs how to keep coherent culture over time?
Yeah. So the first question, a little bit about, I think we're quite a democratic company in the sense we have a lot of inputs on key decisions, beyond the area owner or the C-level who owns a certain thing. So I think we're a company that I would like to think we're listeners. We listen to other smart people around, and I can be wrong, and I'm willing to admit that I'm wrong. And I think that's how generally we make decisions, the big ones in the company. Secondly, so what was the second question?
Yeah, the second question I've seen Oscar at the recent interview that he did, that he was explaining that a lot of investors have been telling him over time, you have to change your communication, you have to change the way that you say things because this doesn't align with the culture and so on. And then he said he became more political, which actually broke the company culture, and he needed to change this later.
Yeah.
Did you have something similar?
Yeah, so I think, as I said, our culture has been very important from day one, even when we're a small group, and our values we've identified really haven't changed over the last 10 years. We've adjusted them, we've made them more clearer. Some of the text people didn't really understand, so we've improved them and how they're described, but really the core values have hardly changed, the basics of our company culture. And I think what happened at some point in the growing pains when there was a moment when to get staff and to get high quality performers, and at that point we were competing against, trying to bring people who were based in London to Barcelona or based in Amsterdam.
Is this difficult, convincing
It's
someone
very difficult,
to live from
and
there?
then you end up being a little bit more compliant, and you be a little bit flexible, and maybe allowing employees to be a little bit more entitled.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we probably had a couple of years where we were a bit guilty of adapting our culture more to attract talent and to keep talent instead of the other way around. And there was a point where we felt we were making a mistake, that we should adhere to our culture, and it doesn't matter who it is. This is our culture as a company. And if you don't want to adapt, it's absolutely no problem. You can be an amazing professional. There's other cultures in amazing companies who have a totally different culture, and they're amazing, even more amazing than us. And you'll probably find a great place there, but this isn't for you, and vice versa. I think we did a step change in that sense. It's part of the growing pains of, building a company with, 3,000 plus employees from 5 people in a small office in Barcelona in record time. And yeah, it was good learnings. And I'm glad we realized fairly quickly that our culture is very important, and we're not the perfect company for everyone. And we never will be, and we don't want to be.
So it's keeping the identity, saying things as they are, and it also filters people out that you don't want them to be there.
It's not that we don't want. It's maybe the other way around. I mean, you can have super talented people doing a great job, but culturally, if they don't fit in with their colleagues, it's going to create issues that go beyond. And I think it's more about, obviously, us not wanting people who don't fit into our culture. We do that in the recruiting process, and also, the performance reviews are heavily weighted on values, not just performance. Heavily weighted. But it's also somebody who in that company doesn't feel this is the vibe they want, and they should find a company where the vibe is theirs, and they're going to be super passionate. And I think it's fantastic. So it's very mutual for me. In the performance reviews, culture and values and alignment to that is in fact, in my case, the way is more important actually even than individual performance. You can have a bad quarter, you can have a bad semester performance-wise for various reasons. But if you're culturally aligned, then I know you're going to recover next quarter. The other way around is very difficult to change somebody's culture. Somebody's not humble, probably will never be humble. They can work on it, they can do, but if their natural state is not to be a humble person, then I think you're swimming against the waves.
Yeah. What are the before we jump into Yellow, I want to ask a few questions there. Is personalization going to be playing parts in the quick commerce in the future? And by that I mean, is there any world that information about the person, like for example the type of goal they have, some sort of, I know their health, I know their where they want to if they want to lose weight or if they want to add weight and so on. Do you see this playing any part of the quick commerce in the future or not?
Yeah, I think it's inevitable. The amount of information that we give to technology. I have an Oura Ring, and I think you can see the beginning of that, of what AI and agents and how we interact with agents, and it's going to change. I'm going to know how probably have my personal agent or agents who will know a lot about me. It'd be very useful for me, for that agent to know about me, because they'll be able to help me make decisions. They'll know my emotional inclinations, and obviously that has a direct line to how I consume products, right? So that's definitely going to happen. How it happens, I'm not exactly sure. I'm not sure if when I want something, I'll go to Glovo and then there'll be an AI that will help me make the decision and know a lot about me, or it could be the other way around. The Glovo plugs into and my agent uses Glovo. We'll see. We just need to ride the storm, be very, very alert and get on the leading trends. I think that's going to happen for sure. It's inevitable, and I think it's actually positive, right? It's positive that that I can have services or things that are actually beneficial to me. I think it's going to be exciting. It's going to be hugely exciting.
You reached this journey. You mentioned 10th, 11th year of Glovo. There was an acquisition happened. Like, how comes and you stay in Glovo? How comes and you're still there and you keep going?
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. I'm having fun. I'm learning every day. I'm learning. Surrounded by super smart people. Most of them younger than me. And, hopefully I'm still useful. So hopefully I'm still bringing value to the company. If those things work, then I'm super happy. Glovo will always be my baby. And it still feels that way. As again, we've got autonomy of how we run the business and got our own brand and, stuff we built is still continuation. So I think if those elements are there, fantastic. And if they're not, then, I'll do something else.
There is this, when there is no startup community existing in a country, there is always this message that we need a big success. And if there is going to be a big success, then more people are going to be inspired and so on. In Spain, you started very early on. Like, I'm guessing that amount of success around were not that many. You achieved that with Glovo. Did you actually see things changing because of the success of Glovo?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the biggest issues I think we had from fundraising is, that we weren't based out of London or Berlin or Paris. I mean, I think that definitely hindered us with big international funds. There hadn't been some major successes in Spain and certainly Barcelona. I think the largest pre-us, was Privalia, which is from Barcelona. Great guys, by the way. And I think they did a 500 million exit. But there hadn't really been any massive success stories. And VCs told us that, by the way, when we were going there, and it hasn't been any successes. And VCs,
but how does this make any sense? You guys were expanding in different places, so why would it make sense that you are based in Barcelona?
Our headquarters were there. I mean, we love the city. It's a great place to build a business.
Exactly.
It's a great place to talent. What's your question exactly?
You expanded in multiple countries, so you are no longer a Spanish company, let's say. The markets that you are addressing.
Yeah, but I mean, venture capital is very conservative generally. I mean, they're looking to cover their risks, right? They can have a bet on a British company or a French company with the same numbers as a Spanish company. The lack of knowledge of the Spanish market, of how talented people are. I mean, they're quite conservative, considering most people think they're huge. They're not entrepreneurs. They're actually investing other people's money, and they want to have safe bets as best as possible. And we were definitely not a safe bet.
So was an ecosystem created because of the success of Glovo?
So again, when we started Glovo, there wasn't much of a VC ecosystem in Spain. There was a few funds in Madrid who were doing, but they're very small funds. So pretty much after our Series A, we had to go abroad to fundraise, and we had to go to Europe, and luckily we were successful, and we even went to Japan. Rakuten invested in us from Japan, which was super cool. And then answering your question about now that Glovo has had a relatively high exit, does it? I think many people have told us that thanks to Glovo positioning Barcelona on the map, it's allowed other unicorns to appear, and there's a handful of great companies now in Barcelona, amazing. Travelperk, Factorial, Exotica. These are companies that, and I think it certainly helps them that there's been some success stories in Barcelona, and obviously we're one of them now. We're one of the first unicorns in Spain. So,
why doing a fund?
I've been investing for a number of years, and specifically last 5 or 6 as a business angel. And Oscar was doing the same, actually. And we'd coincide in quite a lot of investments. And we just thought, wouldn't it be great to professionalize a little bit what we're doing, which, to be honest, is business angel is very emotional, chaotic. You're not really thinking about, structured ways of investing, and I think it was a great learning experience for us to learn, how to be professional investors with the investment team. So yeah, in essence, it's really professionalizing what we're already doing with these, and then surround us with investors. No, we're operators and entrepreneurs, but we have a great investment team. Adam, other partner, he's ex-Atomico, one of the biggest funds in Europe. Super, disciplined on where we invest and everything. So we complement each other really well, because we're very operational and we understand the insides of how the companies work and everything. And, we've felt those pain points. And they've got the investor discipline that we work together. So yeah, I'm very excited. And as well, me personally, it's learning. Again, it's learning a different part that I, never done structurally. I'd invested, but I'd never looked at it as a professional way of doing things. It was much more emotional. I like this founder, like the idea. Yeah, I'll put a ticket. Never think it could be a small Spanish win or a huge unicorn. I didn't think in those terms. So yeah, it's very, very different, by the way, as well. You're investing other people's money, which is a responsibility. Whereas when you have your own money, just investing it, so you don't care, but you're less concerned. You're more willing to risk take. So yeah, I think it's exciting, and things are going very well.
What's the type of founder that comes with the perfect metrics, but you don't invest in them? What characteristic do they have?
I think self-awareness and being grounded is very important.
How can you tell when they meet when you meet them? Can you tell about that?
There's not one magic answer to tell. People can leave details of and the thing is, if you're not grounded, you're not humble, you'll end up not being a team player. And companies are built through teams. You can have rock star CEOs, but there's teams, and talent wants to work with people they want to work with. And we all know that. This is not rocket science. I mean, top talent doesn't want to work with assholes. So they'll, independently of their got an amazing idea, ruthless execution, at the end of the day, the growth will be hindered by not being able to have people of quality working with you because they don't want to work with you. So I think it's a bit of that. I think would probably be the best answer. There's a lot of ways that then, other traits. Generally, the description you said of a potential founder is not that, because to get to where they were, the description you gave is they're probably hard worker. But one thing as well is, this is not going to happen just because you hit the lottery. This is going to happen through hard, disciplined, consistent work over time. And also to hit all those walls that you're going to find, all the crises, you need to overcome them. So you need to be persistent. That's a trait. Generally, founders who are, what you described as excellent with a great idea and everything, generally, they would be that, or else they wouldn't be there at the table. But sometimes you find a founder who's maybe come in a big company, who's managed a lot of people, who now wants to build a company. You feel maybe he's not that killer, that you need to really go over that, and that persistence and consistent hard work, especially in the early years, to make this actually work and get the traction.
For the fund, for the next 5 years, where do you want the fund to be? What kind of investments do you want it to make?
So Yellow is a pre-seed fund. We do some seed investments as well. And we obviously follow on some of the best projects. It'd be, if I had to describe it in 5 years' time, it'd be when great founders in Europe are setting up their company and they have the idea, for us to be their first phone call. They see Yellow as, one of the best pre-seed funds in Europe that were perceived of helping founders. One of the great things about Yellow, and I think all our portfolio would back that up, and actually they've helped us get deals, because most of the deals we do in Yellow are very oversubscribed. Most funds want to get in there. We're a new brand. We're new guys on the block. We're very proactive in helping them. Lead generation, getting clients, finding talent. We're quite proactive with operational ideas, obviously. I have Oscar and myself there. So I think that's our superpower of really, obviously we don't lead. So Yellow's, we're not lead investors, so we're not the largest investor in the rounds. Yet we're generally perceived as the most proactive in helping. And I think that's our strong point that we're going to really focus on. But yeah, ideally it would be the Yellow brand is there and it's perceived as, the best or one of the best pre-seed funds. And when I'm doing a round, I want Yellow in there.
Most of the people that want to raise their first investment and so on, they don't really know, like they expect you to say like, my product is really great, my metrics are really great, and then to reach out and so on. Like, can you describe a couple of ways that are the best ways that you have seen until now, how people approached you? And then second, what would their business look like, or what did they look like as a founder that convinced you to invest?
Okay, so our perception on this, I mean, we're trying to invest in the best founders, in Southern Europe, in France, in DACH, in Central, invested in Germany and in Switzerland. And generally, what's happening today is these top founders with a good credibility in the past either built a startup, did well with fundraising, come from a C-level scale up. It's pretty much the opposite is happening. Top pre-seed funds are, throwing term sheets at them. So they're just oversubscribed. So our job at Yellow is to convince them we're a good partner, that we complement their other investors very well, that they want us in because generally, as I said, they're very oversubscribed, so they can pretty much choose investors, and that's the profile we're looking at. We're looking for really top founders who can build the next unicorn. We co-invest with the leading European funds, so some of the big names and also build a relationship with those funds, because if we're helping their portfolio companies and we're perceived as being very operationally friendly to the founders, the next time they have a good deal, they'll call, hey, you should get Yellow in there to help you. And there's a bit of that beginning to happen. And of course, the regions where we're, very well centered, Spain, Southern Europe, Portugal, if we see some good deal flows funds, then we'll probably call some of our partner funds in Europe to maybe lead the round.
And is the goal for the fund to increase in size over time?
I think the tendency will be, of course. I mean, we want to stay pre-seed. That's our sweet spot, and pre-seed and seed. But yeah, over time, I think tickets are going to get larger and rounds are going to be around, especially these top founders, right? Get close to the US, and you have somebody who's built something before in the US, and they go out there, they get thrown 20 million.
Yeah,
it's not happening yet in Europe, but I think that's going to be the tendency, and therefore the fund needs to grow in accordance with that.
Okay, I want two more questions. The first one, I cannot go without asking you about your thoughts around AI. Like it's trending today and so on. Like, what do you think AI is going to be in the next 3 years, 5 years?
I think everything we're reading about it's going to be. I think there's different areas. So I can say how we use AI today, which I think we're touching the surface as a company, but it's really building. So first of all, our logistics algorithms, we've been using AI and machine learning for many years to optimize. Any second we save, doing millions of orders a day, any second we save on delivery is a lot of money, It's incremental money for the courier because he can do more orders that hour. It's better UX for the consumer. So, and what's happened more recently is we're now integrating into customer support. And remind you, Glovo has 3 customer supports, very different. We give customer support to our customers, the person ordering the product. We give customer support to our courier if they have a problem. They have a different app. And of course, our partners, the local commerce that's selling on our marketplace, on our platform. It's restaurants, stores. So all of them have a different need of customer support. So we have 3 levels of customer support. And, integrating AI into that, obviously, typical 80% of, issues are probably the same. So you can do the front level, automate that. And then what it does is gives the human part much more quality responses. They can spend more time on the quality answers without incremental costs. So I think that's the tendency short term and today of how customer supports. Then internally, the teams obviously evolving. I mean, AI for image generation for our restaurants and stores, no? So now they can help generate cool images that will attract users better because using soft, so a lot of that is being built into the platform. Super interesting. Basically optimizing and improving things that were generally done manually. And then internally with the teams, obviously we have the tech teams who are now using AI to code. Instead of coding everything themselves, now they have help so they can actually think more and be more analytical and produce more code in the same amount of time than previously. And then finally, what I think we're doing quite well is we're pushing departments to show how they use AI on a monthly, quarterly basis. So, how have you used AI in our OKRs? So, what service have you used? We're forcing habit change. Now, for me, I want to do a report and write it up. Typically, I would have wrote that myself, a year ago, and wrote it all down. And now, it's the easiest thing for me was to continue to do it that way. But now I can use AI to help me write it and everything. And in the end, in the beginning, it doesn't save you time, but very quickly you realize, well, it does save me a lot of time. So that allows me to do that same report in X amount of time, and that free time I can use for something else. So it becomes forcing teams to really integrate it into their work streams, to be more agile, more efficient, and therefore free other times to do other things, maybe more analytical, maybe more actually using your brain instead of doing manual stuff. So I think we're in that phase. I think the future in our industry is I think somebody's going to invent a great UX with AI for buying online or for e-commerce. A little bit what Steve Jobs did with the iPhone, right? Steve Jobs came out and then everyone just, wow, that's a game changer. The apps and the interface and the whole screen. And, obviously everyone copied that. And now that's a standard. And I think there's going to be a company that's going to come out with an amazing UX for e-commerce. And it could be voice, could be text, it could be a mix of both plus a menu, I don't know. And everyone's going to go, wow. And then, it'll change the way we interact with our phones. Now with our phones today, maybe with our glasses.
Some sort of glasses, right?
And I think that's going to be the game changer where society just, wow, this is incredible.
Mm.
And you'd say maybe to your app, can you please order me a pizza? The same one I had, I think it was in last July or last week or something, large. And I'm going to be home at 7:30. You forget about it now. It'll be something like that.
Mm. Speaking of, in 10 years from today, what is Glovo like?
It's probably, I think, a part of people's lives for sure in the cities where we operate. I think in 1,800 cities worldwide. So, be a reference for people in the cities, the marketplace that you can pretty much get everything in immediately. A lot bigger. And I really think if you talk about 10 years, local commerce and retail will be 80% of Glovo's business compared to 20% restaurants. I think once consumers realize that digital local commerce is a reality, I think they'll use technology like ours, our platform, to pick it up, for us to deliver it, to order it. I mean, part of our system could be, hey, I'm walking home. Do you have that in stock? Save it for me. I'll pick it up on the way home. That's part of our digitalizing that. And I think anything that's not, I call it entertainment. So anything that's not, you're doing it for fun, like necessity, I think will be ordered online, digitally, and hopefully most of it through Glovo. And I think everything else that's more fun, like, hey, let's go shopping. This famous Saturday with your partner. Hey, should we go shopping? You don't need to go shopping. But you just go and you wander through the shops and it's more discovery and somebody's giving you an advice. Yeah, actually, I've got this. Could be around food, gourmet food. It could be around clothes. It could be your next pair of trainers. There's a discovery part, which I think people still want to walk in and have that sensation. But everything else, I think it makes no sense. I mean, it's not fun going to get, the washing up liquid or, the toothpaste. That's not fun. That's not discovery. And that's the sort of thing that I think is going to move online. And I think the great advantage of Glovo, again, is we're so near to the consumer, right? So local commerce and the consumer is immediate. So that's what makes it immediate, and we can deliver in 30 minutes. And that's unique. And I think once that starts taking off, it's going to be like a snowball. And I think quick commerce is going to be absolutely huge.
With that, Sacha, it's been an awesome conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the invite.